Hey guys, it's Coach Fran. So today what we're going to talk about is solving equations using parentheses. And anytime that we have an equation, what it's going to require is us to use a certain property that you may have heard before called the distributive property. So what does it mean to distribute? So what it means is what you'll see typically in a problem is something where there's a number on the outside of parentheses with some other items inside the parentheses. So whenever I'm distributing, what really we're going to be doing is we are going to multiply, because whenever you hear the word distribute, you should associate with multiply, is you want to multiply the term outside the parentheses to everything inside the parentheses. So to every term inside of the parentheses. Now, keep in mind what you have seen in other videos from other teachers. Terms are any variable or any value separated by a plus or minus. So we have to identify first, what are my terms outside of the parentheses, and then what are my terms inside of the parentheses and how many I have, because then that's going to determine how many times I have to multiply. So I've got two examples for us to look at. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. This first one. What you'll notice is that I do have parentheses, so my mind should go right into distributive property. So what I first want to identify whenever I'm multiplying, I'm going to get a highlighter out, is I want to identify the term outside of the parentheses here. So what is that term, or where is it? So I notice I have parentheses. Is there a value outside of it? Hopefully your eyes go towards that -5. Okay. That number is touching the parentheses and it's not separated by a plus or minus, because the big confusion is what people get confused here and get mixed up with is they'll think that if I get the same problem that looks like this, that I'm multiplying this -5 into the parentheses, and that's not the case, because technically there's a number right here. That number is an understood one if you don't see anything. And you may have heard that in prior videos, but we will be going through that a lot this year. The number, in order to multiply it, must be directly to the left of the parentheses with no plus or minus in between. So this is not distribution of that -5. So here, if you do this -5 and you try to multiply that, that's a big no-no. In this case, what you would have to do is if you were multiplying this problem, you'd actually be multiplying the understood one there. Okay, so we're not doing the -5 and multiplying. Okay, so just something to think about with that. Now, in this case, I noticed the -5 is directly touching those parentheses. So what I'm going to do in this problem is I'm going to multiply that into every term inside of the parentheses. So what I want to identify first is how many terms are inside of the parentheses. Okay, so inside. So I notice terms are separated by a plus or minus. So here I have an A, which is a term, and 2, which is another term. I know that they are separated terms because they are separated by a plus sign in between. So when I'm working this, I want to multiply that. So what I'm going to do is multiply the -5 on the outside times everything on the inside, so 2 times. And you've probably seen people draw lines before. So a -5 times an A, those are different values. I can't really multiply a -5 times an A and get a new number or a new letter. So what we do is we just write them right next to each other, side by side, which is going to be -5A. And then we multiply the -5 times the 2. So -5 times a +2 is -10. Now, that's still going to be equal to 30 because I haven't done anything to that right side. There's no distribution, no combining of like terms like we've talked about in prior videos. That needs to be done. So what we have to do here is now just solve the equation using inverse operations. We want to get the a's by themselves and move any number to the other side. So in order to start this, you might say, okay, this minus 10, how can I get rid of this minus 10 here? Well, the opposite of minus 10 is plus 10, so both sides. Leaving me with just a negative 5a, because that comes down, which is equal to 40. Now, keep in mind, what we have here is we have a negative 5 times a. So notice what I just said, negative 5 times meaning multiplication. So I have to get rid of that times negative 5. So the opposite of multiplying by negative 5 is going to be dividing by negative 5. In order to get that a by itself, because this now is going to cancel out that negative 5 and leave me with that a. And then 40 divided by a negative 5. 40 divided by 5 is 8. And a positive 40 divided by a negative number is a negative. So I know my answer here is negative 8. Keep in mind, a way that you could check yourself is to substitute this negative 8 back in for a. So if you wanted to check your work, take the original problem, and anywhere there's an a, let's replace it with negative 8. And I know I did this right if I end up with a true statement, or the same thing on both sides. So negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6, which is still times negative 5. And does negative 5 times negative 6 equal 30? Yes, it does. So I know that negative 8 was my correct answer. So going to a second example here, what we want to look at is what if there's parentheses on both sides? So keep in mind, from last example, what we talked about is there was distribution on one side, but sometimes you have to multiply on both sides of the equation. So same thing as we did last time. I want to identify terms outside of the parentheses. Okay, I notice I have parentheses on the left side of the equal sign and on the right. What's on the outside of the parentheses over here is a 2. What's on the outside on the right, I also notice, is I have a negative 3 outside of these parentheses. My terms that are inside on the left side over here, I see an x and I see a positive 1 because they're separated by a plus in this case. On the right, I have a 2x because that's one term. Keep in mind, we said terms are separated by a plus or minus. There's no plus or minus in between that 2x, so that's one term. The 4 is also its own term because it's split from that 2x by a minus sign. So that kind of shows me what I'm going to be multiplying by when I'm working this. So on the left side, I'm going to multiply this 2 times the x. So 2 times x is 2x. And then the 2 times the positive 1, which is going to give me positive 2. That's going to equal whatever I get on the right side when I distribute. This negative 3 times the positive 2. So negative 3 times positive 2x is negative 6x, because negative 3 times 2 is negative 6, and the x comes down. And then negative 3 times a minus 4. So a negative 3 times a negative 4 is a positive 12. So now working this is just a regular problem where we're going to get our variables to one side and get our constants to the opposite. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this negative 6x to the left side. So to move a minus 6x, I'm going to add it to both sides. So then 2x plus 6x, I have 8 x's. Plus 2, I'm just going to bring that down. And then on the right side, I have positive 12 left over. So now that I have all of my x's on the left side, I want to get this plus 2 over here somehow. So how I'm going to do that is by doing the inverse of plus 2, which is minus 2. So when I do that, that positive 2 goes away. And 12 minus 2 is 10, which is equal to 8x, which was left over. So the x is not by itself yet because there's still a number with it, which is 8. Keep in mind, just like last time, anytime a number is right next to a variable, it's implied that it's multiplying. So how I get rid of this 8 is I'm going to divide it away. So 8 and 8 cancels out, leaving me with just the x. Now you'll notice 10 over 8 doesn't come out nicely, so we can either write it as a simplified fraction or a decimal. So keep in mind, if I divide the top and bottom by 2, because 2 goes into both those numbers, my answer can be either 5 over 4, or if you use a calculator, that is 1.25. Either one of these are acceptable. Okay. So like we've talked about, think about distribution as multiplication, and then you always want to identify the terms outside and also the terms inside of the parentheses. Okay.